Hello everyone, this is El Spectro. Welcome back to the Land of Empires. And in this video, I want to talk about the recent changes to the rewards that have been made to the Battle of Disorder. So these rewards were changed just about 12 hours ago, or at least within the past day. And to summarize, the center capture rewards have been quite significantly reduced from their former value of 300 for the first occupation participation, and the general occupation has been reduced from 100 down to 25. Now, I want to comment first and foremost on the general occupation reward. So, when I sent out the suggestion, my suggestion was basically to allow the entire faction to receive the alliance-wide rewards for the first occupation. So instead of having the alliance who did the first capture receive every single reward from the middle, so the general reward as well as the participation reward, I suggested the entire faction receive the alliance-wide rewards. Now, this is actually something that they kind of implemented in the shape of the 120 sands here. So now the entire faction will kind of get the participation rewards, at least the sands component. Now, I'm not a big fan of that because I think that the 40 clamps should also be part of the faction-wide reward. Now, one thing that was a disappointing update was the reduced or significantly reduced reward for the first occupation. So this was reduced from 300 down to 75, meaning that once again, we kind of have this issue of the dominant alliance receiving lower rewards. Now, I can see kind of an upside of this change where now we don't really have this shit show that the last hitter, so whichever alliance hits the center last or gets the last burn tick and gets the first capture will receive everything. So now instead we have kind of this general 120 cents reward, but a reduced specific rewards towards the alliance actually doing the first capture. Personally, I just think that there should be competition in the middle. Now, when both sides are kind of balanced, we can have an intense fight in the middle. But at least from my observations across different factions. So, for example, this bracket features XLGX plus ABSO and Server 59 versus BBB NMR and Server 79. Now, if we were to zoom out, a lot of the battlefield has changed since a couple days ago. But before we were able to push towards the center, NMR was able to completely capture the gates from ABSO, and same with Server 79 against Server 59. So this does pose kind of like a balance issue where some sides may be able to control both gates of their opponent within the second region. And when you have kind of a balance issue, what ends up happening is pretty much nothing nothing's going on in the center region. And I'm just not entirely sure whether that is something that the developers have intended, because once you are kind of in a losing position, it is actually quite difficult to push back because you have different alliances joining together in terms of tile connections. So wherever we see, we have multiple alliances sharing tiles. And although that is not necessarily a bad thing, one thing that I do want to see somewhat changed is, I guess, how the shrines and captured targets can be competed over. Initially, before I read the Facebook post, so the developers introduced this new factions-based game mode through the Facebook post, and I actually didn't read that before going into this Battle of Disorder. So my initial assumption was that although players could kind of share tiles, they would not be able to stack on top of each other, meaning that if someone is attacking me, for example, if BBB is attacking me and NMR comes to reinforce, then NMR would clash with BBB. So that was my original assumption. And through that assumption, I kind of assumed that the flags and center could also be competed over within the same faction. Now, instead of that, we kind of have a case where you can see people stacking all their marches, well, in preparation to actually burn the middle. And really, the hope now is to be the one dealing the final hit in the middle. So I think overall, the good change was that they increased the faction-based reward. But I think overall, it just negatively affects the dynamics of the Battle of Disorder in the center area. When both sides are fairly balanced, which I think is very difficult to achieve unless you kind of just handpick these alliances, like truly handpick, have a player that understands a lot of these alliances, how active they are, how strong they generally are, and do some kind of handpicked matchmaking. But that is, of course, a lot of work, and I don't think the developers should be messing around with that. And yeah, really, the current system is just a little unfortunate, both in terms of combat excitement, because you can see nothing's really happening after the alliances have been able to push all their opponents back to pretty much the first area. So we were able to capture our gates, but once at least 2 alliances ganged up on us, we were not able to make any further progress pretty much. And the fact that they're also able to go into the Area 2 territory means that, yeah, it is very hard to push out from any location. And yeah, so that aspect, once again, I don't really mind. I think right now the problem is once the factions have consolidated, so if one side has overwhelmed the other side, then there is no longer any fighting potential left within the event. And that might be a big disappointment to certain alliances, which may enjoy doing some of the fighting, because after all, a large part of the fighting comes from a large part of the rewards come from personal rankings. So if you are in an alliance versus a relatively weaker alliance in Area 2, you won't be able to do much fighting, you won't be able to farm much points, and by the time you push out, maybe every other alliance are pretty much done with their fight. So if you have no opponents, you don't really have any ways of gaining points, then you will be left with a relatively low personal point score. And I mean, even if you capture the middle, that's just 75 extra sands that is, of course, way less valuable than having 300 sands. So as the event currently stands, I really think what they should do maybe is to slightly tweak the faction, like how factions work. I think that although players should be able to teleport to adjacent tiles controlled by opposing alliances within the same faction, they should not be able to so easily work together with different alliances. So for example, when a player sets an army on a certain tile, another player from a different alliance should not be able to join that army and stack on top of each other. I think that they should still be opposed to each other, but have some benefits, such as sharing adjacent tiles. And one thing that I think should also be the case is that different alliances within the same faction should be able to capture each other's tiles and also each other's buildings. Of course, faction-wide, it will not achieve any benefit because the total faction force will not change if an alliance within the same faction captures over your flag. However, I think it will lead to more interesting dynamics, and it will also address the current issue of the developers being forced to lower the reward because otherwise it would lead to a lot of drama where under the current system, it is just almost purely based on luck of who actually manages to land the last hit. And some people have brought it up that they feel it's really bad game design that a strong faction, for example, maybe they will carry two weaker factions into the center and ultimately not being able to take the center reward because the weaker faction is just gonna, through sheer luck, take it from under them. And yeah, a correction would just be probably to, as I said, to allow warfare between alliances of the same faction, but still retain some of the benefits of sharing the faction, such as being able to capture adjacent tiles between alliances of the same faction. And I'm not sure whether we need any more than that, to be honest. And I think that some faction wide benefits, for example, could be to have flags also generate stat buffs for members of your faction. So, for example, if you capture a flag, if you capture a flag, then every member within the same faction will get an all stat, like maybe a 20% all stat buff to attack, defense, ferocity, and HP. So the more flags you capture, the more buffs you can receive. And if people are more focused on the middle, for example, then weaker alliances may be able to start capturing more flags from the back end and support their other faction alliances indirectly through that method. I think that will make battles much more dynamic and much more interesting, and also allow the developers to change the reward back from 75 to 300 or 400. Because right now, I don't think anyone's really happy about the decreased reward, where, I mean, yeah, it just leads to just idle play. And I don't think that's something that a lot of, especially SS tier alliances, really want to see in the Battle of Disorder. So personally, I think the faction system is fine. A lot of people have found a lot of enjoyment fighting together with other alliances. I just think that the current faction system is too powerful and negatively influences the overall dynamics of the Battle of Disorder after the center opens, especially for capturing the center shrine. So yeah, I hope everyone can leave some comments and just give me some feedback and on how you feel about the current faction system, the rewards, and how the faction system may be improved, and how you see the current Battle Disorder as a whole. So yeah, now that the center has opened, I just think we can take the chance to kind of take a look at how this works. So as everyone knows, the number of defenders have been lowered from the original 201 down to 20. And this was actually highly suggested by many players. Highly suggested by many players. And I'm glad they lowered the amount. So although this is not really an issue for SS tier alliances, outside of that, alliances actually have quite a hard time reducing the number of defenders. And also, even in SS tier, it kind of can lead to gridlock because people have to spend hero stamina to lower the number of defenders, and the opposing alliances can take advantage of that. Of course, now with factions, that's much less of an issue. And the issue now is actually looking at how this ends up working. So I think what's going to end up happening is all three of these alliances, they're going to send their players to the middle. And yeah. And whoever gets the last hit is going to get the rewards. And I guess we can see a little bit of the initial feedback from the chat here to see how people feel about how the factions currently work. Yeah, let's just ask some people here what they think. But while we're waiting for people to start fighting in the middle, I guess I could talk about a little bit about how heroes just kind of work in season 7 in the battle disorder, because I think that yeah, the dynamics is really interesting compared to other seasons. In other seasons, you kind of relied on one composition and one composition only. And anything that is not that composition kind of suffers. But heroes like Leona actually changes things up quite a lot. So after the buffs that Leona got, what she can do is she can deal heavy damage to the infantry. I mean, to pretty much all units within the enemy team, granted that she lives long enough. So if she uses her ultimate skill, for example, wait, what is this? 50? Wait, what? 4.6. What is going on here? 50. I am so confused. What is this symbol? 36.5? Is this... I have no idea what this is. Is this just the skill rating? That is so random. Like, what is the point of this? 7.6? I mean, I guess that is just some arbitrary skill rating that does absolutely nothing. Like 18.8. Just call it season 3. Like, what is the point of this skill reading? 10.2? What are purple heroes then? 6.2? 5.2? Come on. Like, this serves absolutely no purpose. It's redundant, and I'm not a fan of it. But anyways, we're talking about Leona. So, yeah, compositions involving Leona are actually very, very interesting. There are pretty much counters to every single composition as far as I'm aware. And if we could look at some of the reports, I favorited a few reports here. So we can see, yeah, I'm using Michael here. Turns out Michael plus Dorothy is actually quite decent. So Michael, Dorothy, and Lisbeth using Horn God's armor versus Michael, Morgan, and Leona. So this composition wins. So the favorite composition, like you might think that the team that Marlene is using is bad, but this composition actually counters the favorite composition that was previously in the previous Battle of Disorder before Leona got buffed. So pretty much everyone's running this composition and it was just kind of invincible. So this composition gets beat out by this composition with Leona, and you can really see kind of the power of Leona. I'm only running 60,000 Leona and she's dealing quite a lot of damage to the enemy team. And this composition, also crushes the standard Kellerman armor plus a rage skill regeneration supporter like Morgan. So this composition, I would say, is quite powerful. However, it does lose out to some compositions. It does lose out to... I don't really have like an example. I could probably try to find an example. But it does lose out to actually the favorite composition, but without equipping the frost armor on Kellerman. So if you were just to run Kellerman, Dorothy, and Lisbeth with Horn God's armor, that might be the current strongest composition right now. And with the introduction of Leona, actually another interesting thing is that you may not need to run too many infantry due to Leona's third skill. So we will take a look at this in a bit, but if we're just looking at Leona's third skill, it reduces the rage skills damage taken by 80%. But I'm not too sure if this 80% actually applies to rage skills only or skills in general. And evidence shows that this 80% damage reduction is pretty much a all damage reduction. So normal attacks, regular skills, rage skills is all reduced by 80%, which is quite powerful. And this might be what is causing a high troop count for Leona being so powerful, because people are kind of running low infantry, semi-low cavalry, semi-low infantry, low cavalry, and a lot of Leona. And they are showing like wins through that composition, which is really interesting. So look forward to a flowchart which I'm going to make. So what I'm going to do over the next few days is that I'm going to review every single clash that happened in this Battle of Disorder, as well as battles that other people have shared. And my aim is kind of to build a flowchart across all the different composition variation that currently exist in season 7, and hopefully make some sense out of what is stronger than what. Because for a majority of compositions, there are counters to them. So not a single composition right now, as opposed to in previous seasons, is truly dominant within the Battle of Disorder. So in season 6, for example, you have the standard Kellerman with Frost armor, you have Quinn with Chitaurian armor, you have Lisbeth with Horn God's armor. So that was kind of the standard composition. You ran primarily infantry, some cavalry, and very little archer. And see that made season 6 relatively easy. So everyone ran that composition. People didn't really run anything else besides the Kellerman composition boosted by Morgan. But in season 7, there appears to be at least 3 or 4 very strong compositions. And these compositions matter not only in terms of heroes, but also formations. So if I were to, say move somewhere. Oh my god. So if I were to move somewhere, then I can kind of showcase the current compositions I use. And this combination I think is fairly powerful because you can run 3 compositions simultaneously without having to move around any armaments. So here I have Kellerman without any armament, Dorothy, and Lisbeth with Horn God's armament. The second composition, I have Neptunarch, Morgan, and Horn God. And finally, the third composition, I have Michael without armament, Quinn with Morgan's armament, and Leona. And this allows me to send out 3 marches simultaneously. And even if you are a lower player, you can deal a lot of damage to people without using skill 3. Now, if they are using skill 3 and they're running like this kind of composition specifically is still probably the strongest, but I'm sure there are counters using Leona that can gain an edge over this composition. But let's say your enemy was running the top composition with skills 3. Then you'll be a little out of luck because, even though you can probably deal a lot of damage to your opponent, you'll receive a lot of damage or even more damage if you are weaker than them. If they are running this skill and you know that you cannot beat them, then the best way is probably just to run the mirror composition and run it a few times. If you run composition 2 or 3 against this composition, you will suffer quite a lot of damage. But if your opponent is running, say, this composition with skills 3, then you can simply run something stronger. Something that can counter this composition. But yeah, I have not gathered all the battle reports yet. But once I do that, I'll have a better picture of actually what all the counters look like. So they should be starting to burn the center now. 449 marches. Damn. Worst. Yeah, the initial feedback doesn't seem too good. Never miss the reset, spray and pray. I hope they can give me a little more feedback than just this. Because, yeah, this will help me build a suggestion on how to improve the faction system, because right now obviously people are not very happy, especially with the static middle once one side dominates the other, as well as how the rewards are distributed. I think those are the 2 emergent aspects which need to be fixed urgently, at least by the next Battle of Disorder. Yeah. So let's just wait a couple more minutes. With 479 marchers and probably a lot of skill 4s being used, I expect this shrine to fall within the next 5 minutes. So while this is burning down, I guess I can talk a little bit about how the troop losses have changed in Battle of Disorder clashes. So previously, when you clash on a tile, you would sustain 10% critical injuries and 5% death. And what they've done is change the number of deaths or the percentage of deaths from 5% down to 2%. And I think that alongside the Battle of Destiny changes, so in the Battle of Destiny previously, you sustain 35% critical injuries during any kind of clash. However, that 35% was lowered down to 10%, which is pretty much next to nothing. And I think that's really telling in the developer's vision moving forward on the basis of healing versus actual losses. So because that, like over time, they have continuously lowered the losses sustained across any kind of event. When the game first started, we didn't really have very proper resurrection either. So any kind of losses sustained was a lot of wounded, a lot of death. However, over time, we had 80% resurrection, 90% resurrection, and then they even removed the 80% resurrection, and now everything's 90% resurrection. It doesn't matter how many points you have. And they also changed the Battle of Destiny losses from 35% down to 10%. And that's really changed like combat and how you needed to fight in those events. Because previously, the battles didn't last all that long. Players would sustain greater losses over the course of fewer clashes. However, now in the Battle of Destiny, fights would last like forever because each clash only brought about 10% losses. And certain heroes are very good at mitigating their own loss, meaning that the defender would not sustain that many losses and the attacker would just get timed out. So at the end, both sides would sustain very minimal losses. And the only thing that's lost really on both sides is time. Like you have to waste a lot of time trying to push out your opponent. And yeah, injuries are just very few. And we've noticed also in the Battle of Disorder, slowly, the number of losses sustained have been consistently reduced over time. So now from 15%, we have 12%. So only 2% of troops will die, while 10% of troops are critically wounded. And that is compounded by the change in player stamina. So Lord Energy really does not drain as fast as, or it does not drain at all pretty much in any kind of combat. Only Hero Energy drains. So now people are just allowed to fight pretty much forever as long as they have heals left. And this is really the emphasis that the developers have pushed indirectly, I should say, because they have really never made a clear statement of how they want combat to turn out. But I think it is very clear that the developers are emphasizing healing speedups as the primary currency for combat. Like, especially in the Battle Disorder where stats don't really matter too much, really healing, the number of healing speedups is your currency. The more, as long as you have a decent army, like a decently sized army, you can pretty much fight almost forever as long as you have sufficient healing speedups. And I think that will allow the devs to profit from their healing packs as well as the resource packs. So one thing to keep in mind is that, okay, before I go on, I just want to see the outcome of this center clash. Oh shit, I'm lagging. Okay, it is over. Let's see who gets it. Poor BBB. They did not get the reward. How sad. But yeah, I don't like this system. I think it is very, very anticlimactic. After the clash between factions simmers out, there's really nothing to do in the middle. Like, just looking at the scores, there's really no point of taking over additional flags. And so I think there's a lot of work that needs to be done for the center. Let's take a look at the first occupation rankings. And it is what is expected. So only players from NMR was able to get the participation rewards and as well as the first capture reward. Yeah, disappointing outcome. And also, they need to fix the issue of marches becoming invisible. But congratulations to NMR for winning this clash, or winning the first capture in this epic clash between 6 alliances, some of which are not necessarily SS tier. I mean, ABSL is fine, but 59, they don't belong in SS tier. But yeah, what was I talking about? I was talking about something. I completely forgot. Oh yeah, healing speedups. Right. So it actually costs quite a lot to heal your troops. So we can see my hospital, it currently has 260,000 troops. So let's take a look at how many resources I need to heal those 260,000 troops. So I need 220,000 food and 270,000 wood. So if we add those two together, that's about 500. That's about 600,000. Oh no, that's not 600,000. That's about 500,000 resources that I need to heal 250,000 troops. Meaning that if I wanted to heal 1 million troops, which is very common in the battle disorder, then I would need 2 million resources. I mean, 2 billion resources. And you can see the strategy that the devs have shifted towards nowadays. We have these new resource packs which you can buy. Thankfully, you can buy quite a lot of them with $100, although $100 is a lot of money, but you can buy up to 6 billion resources with $100. So let's do a quick calculation. So you have 6 billion resources, and I just mentioned that you needed 2 billion resources to heal 1 million troops. So every million troop losses you sustain, you will need every 3 million losses you sustain, you will need $100 worth of resources, and let's see how many dollars worth of heals you will need. So to heal 250,000 troops, you would need 234 hours. So about 250 hours per 250,000 troops. So if you had 3 million troops in your hospital, I mean, if you were to heal 3 million troops over time, then you would need about 3,000 hours. So 3,000 hours and 6 billion resources, that would be around what? How many healing hours do you get per $100? Let's just quickly check that. You get 650. So this is what? This is 650 hours. So you need about $400 worth of healing speedups, right? Like 450 give or take. So $450 worth of healing speedups and $100 worth of resources. So for every 3 million troops you heal, you will need about $550 worth of healing speedups as well as resources. So really kind of this is the direction that the developer have shifted in terms of profiting from these large fights. And I'm not totally against it, but one thing that I do think is an issue is that the few losses taken, it does make the fights kind of boring. I think it kind of drags the fights on for too long, because each clash you lose a maximum of 10% or plus 2%. Which is why in a battle disorder, I prefer burning or even getting burned, because the losses I deal or the losses I take are equivalent to 35% instead of just 10%. So thankfully, castle hits or clashes that happen on a castle tile is still accrues 35% injured from both sides. But yeah, let's see if they gave any additional feedback. Let's scroll up a bit. And the winner of the lottery is NMR. So intense. Epic sarcasm there. And they're absolutely right. I think it is very much very much an uninteresting conclusion, because, I mean, it's just not interesting. So let's see if the rewards are distributed instantly. So this is just Fast and Furious. It does not look like the rewards have been... Oh, the factions rewards are distributed at the end. So the alliance rewards are distributed the moment that the middle is captured. But I think the overall, we can see that the opinion from the chat is overwhelmingly negative on how the faction system currently works. Yeah, there's a lot of work to do, but I hope everyone enjoyed the video. I will soon release hopefully a guide video on all the different Battle of Disorder compositions and their variations, which I think there are a lot of now in Season 7. So I will also release a video on Titanos. Now we have, I think, 7 different Titanos, or 8. And I think it will be interesting to just quickly cover most of them, or all of them, and talk a little bit about their utility across the different seasons, because obviously you cannot get all 7 Titanos in Season 1. So yeah, look forward to that video, and please leave your comments on how you feel about the current faction system, and I will see everyone in my next video. Take care.